Good evening. Tonight, we're taking you inside the high-stakes negotiations between the United States and Iran. As diplomats meet, a shadow of past conflicts is raising some very serious questions about the true purpose of these talks. We're looking at an analysis that's asking a tough question. Is this a real path to peace, or is it a carefully set stage for a future war?
So the whole thing really boils down to intent. Of course, the world is hoping for some kind of diplomatic breakthrough, but the analysis we're covering tonight suggests the situation is actually much more dangerous than it looks, with tensions rising even as the two sides are sitting at the table.
Our focus begins in Muscat, Oman. This is where the current framework negotiations are happening. Now, these aren't the final talks, not by a long shot. They're meant to just set the basic rules for any future agreement. But make no mistake, the stakes here could not be higher. And that brings us to this. A very stark warning from the White House that's hanging over these entire proceedings. The official line is, if negotiations fail, many options are on the table. The message coming out of Washington is pretty unmistakable. It frames these talks less like a dialogue between equals and more like an ultimatum. So, what are the conditions? Well, the terms laid out by the United States are sweeping, and they're presented as non-negotiable. They are demanding a total rollback of Iran's missile program, that Iran surrender all of its enriched uranium, and that it provides unrestricted access for international inspectors to every single one of its nuclear facilities. From the American point of view, that's the absolute bare minimum for success. Now, to really understand why there's so much skepticism about these demands, the analysis we're looking at points to a powerful and troubling historical parallel, the lead-up to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The argument being made here is that the playbook being used today looks almost identical to the one used with Saddam Hussein's Iraq. The analysis suggests that this pattern of escalating demands and inspections isn't a coincidence. It's seen as a deliberate strategy, one that could have very similar consequences. Just take a close look at this comparison. Back then, Iraq was ordered to disclose its chemical weapons. Today, Iran is being told to surrender its enriched uranium. Iraq had to allow weapons inspectors. Iran must allow nuclear inspectors. You see the pattern? The core demand is really the same. Disarm completely and prove you have nothing left. This quote from the source analysis is incredibly stark. It describes what happened to Iraq after it complied, and after inspectors confirmed it had no active weapons of mass destruction programs. The argument is that disarmament didn't bring peace. Instead, it left the nation completely defenseless and ultimately paved the way for invasion and its eventual dismemberment. So this historical precedent leads the analysis to a pretty grim conclusion that Iran is being presented with an impossible choice, a situation where either path it takes could lead to a catastrophic outcome for the country. The central argument here is that the American demands are just so total that really no sovereign nation could ever accept them. To be asked to dismantle your entire defense structure isn't really a negotiation. It's effectively an unconditional surrender. And because of that, the thinking goes, these talks might actually be designed to guarantee Iran's refusal. And this brings us to what the source claims is the bottom line. The method is less important than the final goal. Whether it's through a negotiated surrender or through military force, the stated objective is the complete disarmament of Iran. The negotiations, in this view, are just one of the ways to get there. You can see this fundamental conflict most clearly when you look at what each side considers a successful end to these talks, because you'll see the two definitions are completely at odds with each other. It's laid out pretty clearly here. A win for the U.S. means Iran's missile and nuclear programs are gone. A win for Iran means those very same programs are preserved. They are mutually exclusive goals. There's just no apparent middle ground, which frames this whole situation as a zero-sum game. So, let's walk through the first part of this dilemma that Tehran is facing, according to this analysis. What happens if Iran just says yes, agrees to every U.S. demand, and completely disarms? The argument is that surrender leads directly to what happened in Iraq. Based on that precedent, compliance would mean the government gets overthrown, the nation's resources, like its oil, get seized, and Iran suffers a total loss of sovereignty, essentially becoming a failed state carved up by outside interests. Okay, so now let's look at the other option. What happens if Iran refuses the American ultimatum and decides to resist? Well, resistance means conflict. It means facing the threat of a devastating war with unbelievable destruction and loss of life. But
And this is a crucial point in the analysis. While war is horrific, it offers one thing that surrender does not: a chance, no matter how small, for the nation to actually survive with its sovereignty intact. And all of this brings us to the final analysis from the source material. These talks in Muscat, they're described not as some potential tree of peace, but more like a single seed. And from that one seed, the entire future of the region is going to grow. The core idea of the source is really captured in this one powerful statement. The one who bows their neck to America, America consumes. The one who stands up may be wounded, but may survive. And that, the analysis concludes, is the brutally stark choice that Iran believes it is facing right now. And it's important to note, while the diplomats are talking, the machinery of war is moving. The source makes a point to say that the U.S. military is continuing to position its assets in the region, a clear signal that those other options the White House mentioned, well, they aren't just words. They're being actively prepared for.
And so we end tonight right back where we started. The negotiations in Oman have planted a seed, but the analysis leaves us with a deeply unsettling question. What will that seed grow into? Will the harvest be a fragile peace, somehow built on an impossible compromise? Or will it be a harvest of devastating war, born from an ultimatum that could never be met? For now, the world can only watch and wait. That concludes our report.